introduce what this course is. It's Human Genetics 101. No bad joke, but my son is actually studying that in 6th grade, and he's actually enjoying it. And he bragged today or yesterday to me, and he's got 100, and he's trying to keep it. I'm like, wow, that's supposed to be the hardest unit too. So I was like, dude, maybe you take after your mother. Easy stuff you don't pay attention to, so you don't do as well. And the hard stuff, you're like, got it. So anyway, today we're here for HR essentials for every stage, a growth framework for small companies. So what does that mean, by the way? Who needs HR? Does everybody need HR? And if you're a small business, how does HR apply? Your instructors today are Brian Kinzie and Cristina Martinez de Andino. And this is going to be really exciting course because I think it's always nice when you get more than one instructor because you got a little bit of dialogue, a little bit different perspective on things. So it's going to be a little exciting. And Cristina, could you go to the next slide so we could say the Empower People oath together? Thank you. I, Tiffany Joy Green, do solemnly swear to accept the lifelong obligation to hone my superhero powers and apply those superhero powers to the good of the people I serve. I will promote and add to the ongoing success of Empower People, its members, and the people, organizations, and communities it serves. I will help prepare the next generation of superheroes. I am driven to be a positive change agent for those I serve and interact with. And if we could all just take a quick moment and put our hands on our hips and look up to the sky. This is called superhero pose. It will change your feeling for the rest of the day. You will feel empowered, like you can take on anything. Even if we see the small white stuff falling from the sky, we will not be afraid. And now, Cristina and Brian, I'll leave it up to you.
Amazing. So we're going to be prepared now for HR. Great. So 3 learning outcomes. I'll walk us through that, and then we'll go from, and then I'll introduce myself and Brian. So goals for today is we're going to identify the key HR priorities for different stages of business growth. We're going to understand what they are and why they're important. You're going to come out understanding the difference between functional HR and strategic HR, what those are, and when is it important to begin shifting focus from functional to strategic. And we're going to have a practice activity to assess an organization's current maturity level and to pinpoint their gaps in HR policies and programs. So we're going to get to practice some of the things that we learned today. And before we jump into introductions, I will say that Brian and I have crafted this presentation to have to be able to stand alone, which means there's a lot of text in the slides you're about to see. Please do not feel like you have to read all of these slides. Well, we're going to cover the key points, but that way, when you have access to this presentation, you'll be able to review the content, both in the slide as well as in the video recording. So I like to preface this. Lots of words, don't worry, we got you. And the other thing that I want to note here is that I recognize many of us may fall in the smaller business category, which is a wonderful category. And so we're going to have great content for you here that'll highlight certainly what will be important for you to think through for HR, for your business needs, where they currently might be. And we're going to give you a look ahead in the future as well. If there are opportunities for growth, or if you do continue to grow in maturity for your business size, what does that look like for HR, not only now, but in the future? So we never know how quickly things can grow and expand, or where changes in your industry and competitors may have you pivot and things change for your business. So we'll certainly focus on where things may be for you right now, but also give you line of sight to where things might go. So you can refer back to this and like, oh, I think it might be time for me to think about what the next step in this space might be for me. Okay, with that, I'll do a quick introduction of who I am, and then Brian, he's gonna hop on the mic too. But my name's Cristina. I'm a change strategist. I'm the founder of CMdA Consulting, and I help organizations and leaders spearhead new structures and programming in HR, people, and culture. And I am your change management superhero, and so I'm a pro-side change practitioner. All right, Brian, your turn.
All right, my name is Brian Kinzie. My company is Tinker HR. We focus on supporting small nonprofit sectors with their HR activities on a fractional basis. Anything from putting together an employee's handbook for a company to assistance with recruitment, retention, sticky employee situations, all that fun stuff. And I've been doing HR management stuff for 25 plus years now, which is way longer than I like to think about. So there we go.
Awesome. And Brian and I here as your dynamic duo as we think about both, which we'll talk through functional and strategic HR, which is going to be really exciting. Okay, so I'm going to walk us through high level role of HR and business growth. And then Brian's going to walk us through what do I mean by functional versus strategic HR. So that's coming. So we're here today because Brian and I are passionate about this area. So we're excited to bring this to you, but HR and people are the backbone of your business growth. They help ensure that your people strategy evolves alongside your operations so you drive success. So as you think about operations and technology, what do your people need to grow and succeed in that space and for your business? So we think a lot about aligning your people strategies with your business goals. How do we mitigate risk in this space? Compliance, policies, employee management. We want to make sure you've got a strong foundation. So for HR, so you can maintain your culture no matter the size of your business or how you grow. We want to help you retain your talent, keep them engaged, motivated, and help you grow the leaders of your organization. And this is really about, in many cases, about looking proactively at your workforce planning and organizational design so that your people are enabling your growth and you don't have structures preventing you from moving forward. And some of the risks of overlooking HR are the things that we're trying to mitigate when it comes to what HR is going to help address. But we want to prevent legal and compliance risks. So there are non-compliance spaces in the HR space that can lead to fines, lawsuits, and reputational damage for your business. Let's make sure that doesn't happen. High turnover or low retention. We want to help you keep your top talent and your employees. So frequent employee exits increase your cost to your business and disrupt your operations. The cost to recruiting, the cost to bringing a new employee into the door, we want to mitigate that. We also are looking at employee dissatisfaction and low morale. So unhappy employees can lead to lower productivity and engagement in addition to that turnover issue. So thinking proactively in that space and how to keep your employees engaged, agile, and satisfied. Additionally, when HR is under-resourced, you can have issues with productivity. Inefficient HR systems can slow progress for your business as well. And there are, in addition to those legal and compliance risks, there are damages to your, potential damage to your organizational reputation. Poor HR practices can hurt your brand. And you have employees coming in and having a negative experience with your organization, coming out and sharing that, it makes it harder to recruit, it can hurt your brand, and it can even trickle down to your products and services and how your customers are able to interact with your employees. And under resourcing HR can also lead to increased costs. Think of like bottom line costs, so things around inefficiencies, non-compliance, and turnover issues. I'll pause there. Brian, any other helpful builds around most of the things we are trying to prevent when it comes to our operational, our HR support?
Yeah, I think that what you hit on here is really key. The damage to organizational reputation is something that's really real. If you are an organization that has poor HR practices in place and it becomes a public thing to the rest of the world, it is absolutely going to be a negative thing for you to be able to recruit and retain other talent in the future, and also can bleed out to your customers as well. So you really need to make sure you're doing things the right way and taking care of your employees to avoid running into those types of issues. So.
All right, Brian, if you'll walk us through what I mentioned, both functional and strategic HR. So we'll start here with functional.
Yep. All right, your functional is this is your day-to-day HR, your nuts and bolts, tactical things that you need to do to keep your business running from a people's perspective. So for most companies, you're thinking about your hiring activities, posting your jobs, interviewing, getting people onboarded. You're thinking about keeping their employee files, what needs to be done from that standpoint. If you're offering benefits, setting up benefits packages, basic payroll, that could be considered an accounting or HR activity, depending on how you have your company structured. But those are kind of the core things that you're thinking about from day-to-day functional aspects of the HR part. And this is also where basic compliance falls in as well, as something you're going to be trying to look out for, making sure you're following all the rules to keep yourself out of trouble, like doing your I-9s and things like that. And this is the groundwork that any employer that has anybody that has an employee has to have that functional piece taken care of. So whether it's one employee or multiple employees, you got to have that backbone figured out and in place when you're getting started. And it needs to be maintained and scaled as the business grows in the future. So as far as strategic, I think you're going to jump in now. Go right ahead. Go for it.
Sure. So foundational HR and functional HR are incredibly important, and strategic HR is often looks ahead and is thinking about some of the bigger picture of how your people can drive your business forward. So think about investing in your people to support productivity and growth. And these things might look like learning and development. That could be professional development, that could be skills-based training, that can be leadership development. Also performance management. What are your expectations for your employees for their roles? How do we help them succeed in their current roles, and how do we develop them and the organization as well, and to help them think, and that's also tying to often career fulfillment goals within your organization. Employee onboarding can sit between both functional and strategic HR. It's critical at any stage. And usually as your organization matures, so does your onboarding program as well. Employee engagement is also very proactive. So thinking about about your employees' needs, what's motivating them, and ensuring that is incorporated as a part of your lived experience or your culture. So strategic HR helps you think long-term. We're not just worried about filling our positions, but building a team, a culture that is aligned with your purpose and where you want your company to go. So a little bit of a distinction, but it's helpful because HR can feel so very broad. So we like to categorize these two things. So we're going to reference these two within an organization. So depending on your current stage of growth, different aspects of this will apply, and at least we will recommend for you. And so before we jump into what are those stages, we're going to use a persona here. I'm going to introduce a catering company called Fresh Flavors. We're going to talk about Fresh Flavors throughout this presentation today. And their founder is Claudia Garcia. I'm going to talk about her story and their story of growth. And she owns a catering and food services business. And so as her organization grows from just her to a larger organization, we're going to talk about what that means for her business and what that means for her HR services and priorities as well. So hopefully this will help bring some of these concepts to life as we move through here. So we'll see Fresh Flavors and Claudia throughout our presentation. But before we jump in, I want to give a quick overview to 3 growth stages for small to medium-sized businesses. We all have to start somewhere. And so as you think about launching or kicking off your business or building the foundations of your business, that's kind of your first stage, is this build stage. And then after you've built the foundations of your business, you're beginning to expand upon your services, you're beginning to grow your team more, and you're moving through this expansion mode. And then as your company matures, you've got a set of services, but you're beginning to scale your business. That's the third stage that we're going to talk through today. And I'm going to give an example. We're going to give examples of what we mean by each of these 3 stages as we move through this presentation. But I like to start with, we've got 3 we're going to cover: build, expand, and scale. And we're going to talk about the importance of functional HR across all 3, and where we generally tend to see more strategic HR initiatives. It's not a hard or fast rule, depending on what your organizational goals are, we'll begin seeing them. Usually starting in the expansion stage. It can happen as early as the build stage, but we'll cover what those will look like. Brian's going to walk us through on the build stage, what we mean by that and what HR looks like. I'll walk us through expansion. And we're going to lightly touch scale because I recognize scale is that piece. It's a bit further out in the future for some of our members here, but it's great to kind of see where we can go and what that might mean for HR. Okay, so Brian, I'll pass it back to you.
All right. Build phase, this is basically your startup and foundation. So when you're first getting your business going, that's when we're talking about the build phase, and it's setting up those initial operations and getting your solid foundation for when you start growing. It's that groundwork. So let's move on here real quick. So you're talking about your functional HR things. So always say, as soon as you have an employee, that's when you need to start figuring out what your policies and procedures are going to be. That's when you probably need to start thinking about an employee handbook, something that sets down your rules and guidelines for how you're going to operate as a company. I would say a good employee handbook is a strategic document as well. It's helping you create the culture of your organization, what those expectations are, what the employee can expect from you, what you can expect in return, and it's setting that kind of rules for how you are going to operate. So that's really important. You've got your usual legal compliance stuff, tax documents, your I-9s, your labor law posters you have to chuck up on the wall, or these days with people working remotely, you have to distribute them electronically. You have to make sure you have your employees classified correctly as far as how you're paying them, salary or hourly. If you have somebody who is a 1099 contractor, making sure that they really are a contractor and not an actual employee, that's critical. Your hiring strategy, how am I going to get people in the door? You got to start thinking about things like that. Putting together basic job descriptions is really important at this stage also. What do people do? How are they going to interact with each other? And I always tell owners, you need to have a job description for yourself to remind yourself of what you need to be doing and where your job ends and where your employee's job begin. Basic payroll, comp, benefits, all those fun things are part of this. And your record keeping, what you have to keep on file, how long you have to keep it for, all those kind of legal things are part of this as well. A lot of this is risk mitigation, making sure you're following all the rules and laws out there so you don't get your organization into trouble. So things that you can do at this stage, because no one is born being an HR expert, and it's not like when you start up a company, someone hands you an HR thing saying, here's all the things you need to do for your organization. Bring in an HR consultant to help you with developing your foundation is a really good way of doing it. Payroll services that have some basic HR system support like Gusto or QuickBooks are low-cost alternatives for running payroll as opposed to trying to figure out all the taxes and stuff yourself. Bringing in an employment lawyer to help you out, make sure you have your contracts and policies are all compliant. Those are all outside resources you can go to. And if you're going to be needing to offer benefits because of what you need to be competitive in the marketplace, bring in a benefits consultant as well is a really good step to take at this stage. Okay. Common things that you see is pitfalls in the build stage. Businesses don't have their things documented, so they got one employee with one set of vacation guidelines, another employee with another set, then the two employees talk to each other and they get mad because they're not being treated the same. You can run into legal compliance issues if you're doing different benefits for different people. That can get you into trouble. Putting in remote work guidelines, if you don't have those expectations set, that can have problems. If you don't have the handbook, you end up with inconsistent policies. So those are some really common things that you can see early on in that build stage. Okay. For fresh flavors, let's talk about them real quickly here. During their first early on stages, they only had about 3 employees. They're doing really small local catering events. Owners handling all the HR themselves. They don't have any external person. But they do occasionally bring in an external HR consultant to help them out with some things, and which is good. So they're starting to put some basic things in place. So they're establishing their policies. They're handling all their recruitment and onboarding themselves. And they're trying to make sure that the people they're bringing in match up with the philosophy and goals of the organization. And they're using an HR consultant for basic compliance pieces. Okay. Considerations during this stage, you know, professional development is something to think about. What am I want long term from my employees? What can they grow into? How can I have a better employee onboarding than just handing them their paperwork and having them fill that out and then chucking them out the door to get to work? You know, how can it be something that really integrates them into the team as opposed to just being a paperwork exercise? You know, those are kind of like a little bit longer term considerations, but things you need to start thinking about at this point. Overall integration of HR into the business strategy, you know, thinking about, you know, coming up with that, you know, your org chart of the future. What is it going to need to look like, you know, a year from now, 2 years from now, 3 years from now? And when you're making your hires, be thinking not just about what I need today, but thinking about what you need further down the line. And how am I going to grow the people I do have on board, potentially move into those roles later on? So those are some strategic elements that you're also considering during that build stage of things.
All right. Thanks, Brian. And the only thing I think I would add is that, you know, HR's role is going to evolve. So here, HR might have a lighter, HR responsibilities are lighter because your HR team is much smaller. For example, Claudia at Fresh Labors didn't have a full-time HR employee yet. So Claudia was doing a lot of the work, but she's still partnering with someone with experience to make sure she's compliant. And so she's then still handling a lot of that professional development, the strategic planning, the onboarding. She's got to make sure that happens, and then she collaborates with her HR consultant as needed at that stage. So good to still note those things are happening, but they may be happening at the business owner level or potentially a general manager. So when we think about the expansion phase, it sits between like your big scaling phase and you've kicked off and launched and built your business. It's a little bit in between, right? So you've got these foundational practices, but it's time to create some more structured and repeatable operations to support your growth. You need some BAU things that are really running more smoothly, formalizing some processes. You're beginning to shift to beginning to increase and focus on those efficiencies and formalizing things. And you're preparing potentially for a scaling up phase. And when we think about HR at this stage, HR also is going to be a little bit in that gray space and what is going to be important to think about. Not only do you need to mature those HR functions that Brian's talking about, you're also trying to think a little more proactively, which I love Brian mentioned, like, oh, either at the end of build or early expand, what's the org chart of my future? What is the talent of the future that I need? These type of proactive thinking begins here, especially in the expand phase, if it hasn't already started in the build. So you're going to build on your functional HR elements, like maybe establishing your first HR team. This is where you might begin to have, you know, a team of 1 to 3 within your organization that for HR. And you'll begin to evolve a more advanced compensation and benefits than you might have had in the earlier stage. And you might begin to invest in a more robust HR information system. And that's where you're capturing employee data, where you might be doing your performance management and other aspects of your business will start happening in this we call it HRIS, but your HR information system. And then your compliance training will also need to be, especially if not already established, definitely routine and formalized. So that can be things like sexual harassment training or data and privacy, safety, any safety related training that you need to have for your employees. And then, like I said, you're starting to think ahead, like, okay, we have a recruitment and onboarding process. How do I really formalize it so it's repeatable, because I'm doing a lot more hiring now. Or I need to establish a lightweight performance management process so I can clearly communicate expectations to my employees, how we're going to manage to that, and how are we going to begin thinking about growing them within the organization. And we may be working on succession and key personnel planning at this stage as well. Thinking about that bonus system, potentially for leadership, could be something that's important here, because you might be establishing more of a formal leadership structure. Not that you can't have a COO or CFO in the build stage, but sometimes those roles do wait until you're in the expansion stage. It kind of just depends, but you want to make sure that you've got succession and key personnel planning happening as you're growing your leadership team. And so the types of roles that you need, or we recommend at this stage, is certainly beginning to think through having that HR generalist internally to provide that day-to-day HR functional or operational support. Potentially still leveraging a HR consultant that is external, maybe like a recruiter, to accelerate hiring. Sometimes it's for surge support, or it could be for, depending on how full your plate is, for your HR generalist. I mentioned that HR information systems are really important at this stage, ensuring you do have your payroll services that are also meeting your needs at this stage, because sometimes the one you've got earlier may not be right for what you need right now. And then it also aligns with your compensation, benefits, and total reward support. So having that consultant there to help you think through the right plans as your team grows is really important too. And so something that, Brian and I talked about that, we can see sometimes at this stage is companies will hand some of those HR operational, sometimes even those functional responsibilities to an office manager or an administrator. They've been with the organization really early on in that build stage. They're a great employee, they're reliable, you trust them. And so some of those HR duties begin to be evolved into their role. And what can be tricky at this stage is that person, while trustworthy, reliable, and great, don't have the expertise in employee relations or in HR to truly perform some of those operational responsibilities. And so it can be risky. You can, without that HR consultant or HR generalist who's certified with experience in the space, you put yourself at risk for legal and compliance concerns. You can have inconsistent application of policies. Your hiring and onboarding experiences can take a hit as a result, not from bad intention, but from experience from that individual. So it's really important to think about, do we have someone either in-house or externally that you're working with to bring those best practices to your organization, so your people can do the amazing work that they need to do. So for example, Claudia, at this point we talked about in build, she started with 3 employees and now she's expanding. She's doing still local catering for larger events, maybe like corporate conferences, maybe it's a nonprofit fundraiser, a larger festival, but they're much bigger catering engagements. She needs a bigger team. And so at this point, she is working with an external consultant, but she also has brought someone in part-time as an HR generalist to her team. And what's important for her right now is she wants to prepare to scale her operations. She needs to be able to hire efficiently, but she wants to think about her culture while she's doing this. So that means some of her priorities from an HR perspective, where she's working with both her consultant and her generalist, is formalizing recruiting and onboarding. She's made sure she's got her compliance training in place, and she's thinking about what does it mean to build an internal HR function as a part of this expansion stage. And so as we think about, the role of HR shifts in the expansion stage to begin to take on more responsibilities more formally, where the business owner held most of everything in that build stage. HR is beginning to take some of those things off of the business owner's plates. And so, for example, for professional development, HR might be, you have an HR generalist to help you with that compliance training in-house and making sure there's development tools for your manager, for example. But leadership is probably still going to set the vision or budget for professional development. And your managers on your team are going to make sure they're communicating what the skill gaps are for learning. And maybe now for employee onboarding, where before your general manager handled onboarding, now HR is formalizing that process. Maybe they're the one leading the onboarding kickoff meetings and making sure that onboarding experience is smooth. But managers are still seeing the specific onboarding that to integrate that new hire into their team, whereas HR might be making sure they're integrating into the organization. And same thing, strategic planning. Leadership plays a big role here, but HR's role is to make sure that the work that we're doing functionally and strategically is aligned with what leadership is doing for strategic planning. So HR's role is evolving in this stage. And so what I'll touch on pretty quickly here is the scale phase. And I'm gonna make this kind of quick. This is like our future phase. You've expanded and now we're gonna scale. So if you think down in the future, this is when you've matured your business and you need to really have scalable operations to support more significant growth. More things are centralized, you're strategically expanding, and you've got a lot of cross-functional teams because your organization is far bigger. And your HR needs will opt to evolve with that. You have to maintain your functional HR, but really focus more on that strategic HR space and build upon that. Things like really expanding your HR team. Maybe it's more 3 to 5 HR professionals in-house at this point. You've got a HR strategic roadmap that's connected to your overall business roadmap, but it's a lot more robust because it has to have your talent strategy and maybe succession planning is all kind of incorporated as a part of that. You've got centralized learning and development functions, both for your employees and for your leadership teams. And you have a more formal performance management process that is a few times of the year. That includes expectations for your people leaders to incorporate things into an HRIS. So it's definitely more centralized and much more robust to support an organization that is scaling. I'll skip this. The one thing I will call out here is beware of the ratio of one HR professional for every 100 employees. It's a common what do you call it, misconception, Brian? Your HR, the number of HR generalists you should have should align to your HR goals. So what do you want to accomplish that HR employees need to provide for you? And that's how you should judge how many HR employees you need. If you've got 100 HR employees, but you have some pretty significant onboarding, learning and development, performance management programs that you're running, and on top of the comp benefits recruiting function, you will need more than one HR person. There's just no way they can run all those things by themselves. So depending on what you want to do for that space, I think it's being really careful around that 1 to 100 employee ratio because it should be due to your needs at that time. And so for Claudia, we'll give you a quick snapshot of this. You know, she's gone from 3 to 25, and now she has 150 employees. We've matured her catering business, and she's now serving really high-profile clients, multi-day events, conferences, galas, larger weddings. She's got a full-time HR team. She's got a manager, a recruiter, and an L&D specialist, and she's centralized both professional development and leadership development programs within that HR team. And she's integrated HR as a strategic partner in planning. And in this case, it might look like she has a chief HR officer and they sit at the table with the leadership team. But yeah, I'll skip this too and I'll pause because I think that hits us around the 35-minute mark. Hey. And so Brian and I have some practice activities to apply what we've learned, but first we want to create some space for questions around what we've shared so far. And it's okay if you don't have questions, we can do the practice activity.
Christina, what I'm going to go ahead and do now is I'm going to disconnect us from Facebook because our Q&A segment is only for Empower People members due to the confidentiality statement. So I just want to thank everybody who tuned in and watched on Facebook. If you're not an Empower People member, check the comments below. The link to join is there, and we will see you later.
All right.
Okay.
Ready?
Oh, I think I did the wrong thing. I apologize, everybody. I clicked the wrong thing. bear with me.